and welcome to the Sustainable Infrastructure panel, where we will be discussing building a net zero future. As urban areas continue to grow, it is crucial to focus on building sustainable and resilient cities that can withstand the effects of climate change. The proposed EU directive states that from 2030 onwards, all new buildings should be carbon neutral. The question remains, can Western Balkans countries keep up with this target? Our esteemed panelists today will explore innovation and best practices in sustainable infrastructure and discuss how the paradigm in building roads, buildings, energy and water infrastructure in the region is shifting towards consideration of social and environmental implications, in addition to economic implications. Our moderator for this panel is Aleksandra Njagulj, the co-founder of Sustineri Partners and ESG expert. Joining her on the panel are Novaković Đurović, Minister of Ecology, Spatial Planning and Urbanism of Montenegro; David Margason, Managing Director of Porto, Montenegro; Leon Studa, Investment Advisor to the CEO of Balfin Group; Đorđe Popović, Managing Director of Resulta Serbia; Remon Zakaria, Head of Montenegro for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, or EBRD. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to hold this panel because it's a subject that's very near and dear to me, but to all of us, really. If you think about what buildings and infrastructure are and why they exist, this is to provide shelter. That is the original purpose of buildings, right? It's to provide shelter, to protect us from elements, to be comfortable, to be safe. And this is what they need to continue to be, even in the face of climate changes, even in the face of physical risks that we might be facing. So while we will be talking about energy efficiency, we will talk a little bit about other aspects of environmental impacts that we are facing. And also how buildings, we spend 90% of our time indoors. During COVID, it was 110% of our time indoors. But that is, we live indoors. So how buildings protect us, what kind of environment they give us, it's really important for our health and well-being. And of course, buildings form our communities. Heritage cities like Tibet, heritage environments like Boka Kotorska, Porto, Montenegro, they provide us with context and the history and places in the time and space. So let's talk a little bit about, first, of course, energy efficiency. Yes, buildings have huge impact and they have a big role to play. UNEP hosted the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, said that 37% of carbon globally is down to buildings, the materials that go in them and their operations. And of course, Montenegro, including every single country around the world that signed the Paris Agreement, needs to transpose the nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, into their legislation, into their policies, to make sure that the Paris Agreement objectives are achieved. So Anna, I will start with you, straight on the spot. What can you tell us about how government of Montenegro creates regulatory environment for sustainable development, and especially in building sector?
Thank you, Aleksandra, very much. Let me greet you on behalf of the Government of Montenegro and Ministry of Ecology and Spatial Planning. It is my pleasure to be here today. Unfortunately, I couldn't participate yesterday, but I followed closely media reporting, and I must say that my impression, the key word from yesterday's panels was green, and today I heard women. So I think that this summit already succeeded because women will definitely play the key role in green transition. When we speak about the legislation framework, I know it's not very interesting maybe and quite motivating, but I have to say where we stand, because it is our job in a government to make conducive public policies for the investors, and of course to make public policies in line with green agenda, which is definitely our strategic orientation. By issuing the declaration of the ecological state of Montenegro in 1991, constitutional determination and adoption of the national strategy for sustainable development, Montenegro committed itself to sustainability as one of its key principles of development. Being the part of the European community, we have acknowledged the significance of the European Green Deal as an incentive for solving climate change and diverse environmental challenges, and we are making efforts to implement one of the main Green Deal goals, which is the Europe to become the first climate neutral continent by the year 2050. Achieving this goal requires the transformation of the economy in its entirety, in all its departments, starting from production process, transport, energy, agriculture, construction, public procurement, industries such as steel, cement, information and communication technology. Now, just a short information about the public policies and strategies that we already developed or are developing with aim to achieve the Green Deal goals. So we did develop National Strategy for Sustainable Development, and we did develop Smart Specialization Strategy for Montenegro, within the scope of which the concept of circular economy has been acknowledged also as the element of the vision of development of Montenegro and as a part of the program within the area of energy and sustainable environment. The goal is to increase the use of power renewable sources of energy efficiency in consumption, focusing on innovative technical solutions for the production, distribution, optimization and consumption of power, and strengthening the industrial competitiveness of Montenegro by recycling the industrial waste. We also developed the industrial policy of Montenegro that confirms the gradual introduction of principles of circular and low-carbon economy as a development opportunity of Montenegro. We also developed the Montenegro Economic Reform Program that established a series of reform measures that contribute to the implementation of the circular economy concept in practice. Sustainable green tourism, reduction in the marketing and the use of light plastic bags for carrying and single-use plastic products, and improvement of the business environment by means of reduction of the taxes on wages. When we speak about the construction, I have to say that construction is quite challenging in Montenegro, especially having the whole concept and whole context of urban planning developed not in line with the European integration standards and concepts, but much more ad hoc, without sustainable approach, and without taking care especially on environment protection and green transition. That's why we are intensively working on developing legislation in this area, and in the forthcoming days we will have a new piece of legislation regulating the spatial planning on public discussion. I believe it will be one of the, and it must be one of the very vibrant public discussion. And that piece of legislation, I believe, together with the new law on construction, will determine our future development in this area. What is a fact is that multifunctional buildings and modernization for the built environment is one of the goals and approaches. So old and abandoned buildings might be revitalized by engaging relevant actors, tax policy and subsidies, and this could elevate the pressure of the need for new construction in Montenegro. Conversion projects may enhance existing buildings by making them multi-purpose, addressing multiple needs in the same area. One of the main advantages would be the reduction of land consumption and the optimization of the area that is already urbanized. Unfortunately, in Montenegro, too many areas are already urbanized, so we have to find the balance between development, which is, of course, the key orientation of the country, but at the same time, protection of the environment and developing of the projects that are in line with the green standards and with the green transition policy. I have to say that project Porto Montenegro represents one of the projects that is in line with this direction. That concretely represented what is our strategic goal, and it is to make old buildings new buildings, to use the existing one with revitalization and expertise, and not just to take more and more of our existing space. Of course, all this in line with concept of energy efficiency would be our strategic priority, and I believe by the end of this year, Montenegro will have a new, very conducive and motivational legislation and the environment, both for investors but also for green transition and achieving our goal in this direction.
That's phenomenal. You have given me exactly the lead into the next topic that I wanted to really lean into. Policies usually start with new buildings, but actually the elephant in the room is the refurbishment, right? And especially when it comes to residential, this is a big challenge. You know, how do you deal with that? And it's public-private sector that really needs to work on this together. So Raymond, I would like to sort of invite you to tell us a little bit how EPBD approaches this and experiences in your projects.
Thank you very much, Aleksandra. Well, we as EBRD, obviously as a development bank, we want to help the acceleration of renovations of residential buildings. And I think the key challenge is really how to convince everybody here in the room to invest their money to renovate their building. And if we are living in a multi-apartment building, to convince also all the neighbors, and which obviously may have different incomes and different possibilities. So in that respect, we have a very good case in Lithuania where there has been a mobilization of EU funds. So there was an incentive of 40% of grants mobilized by the state. This was combined with long-term financing. EBRD participated as well, 15 years, so that this can be repaid over time. Full support for low-income households within the building. But what are the kind of ingredients that are needed in order to achieve that? You need definitely regulation, because you need to have energy performance certificates before and after. And this is something that in the Western Balkans region is really required, especially enforcement, because you may have it on paper, but then you may not have it in practice. And the second, you need to have clearly a very good system to be able, or a fund, or a vehicle to aggregate these investments and to enable this merging of grants, technical assistance, because there was also a state agency that was doing the energy audits, that was helping basically these homeowners that really don't know much about energy efficiency to be able to write down these technical specifications for private sector to come and do the renovations. And we have provided the two loans, the first one of 50 million, the second one of 67.5 million to develop this. And this was a very big success. They were achieving 65% energy savings. The target was 40%. And so this was obviously very good also for the residents who were, improving and if you think about it, the value of their assets as well, in addition to saving operational cost. I will not go into other details for the sake of time, but we have other examples if you're interested.
And we can always talk about it over lunch, but it is 60% reduction on your energy bills. Think about fuel poverty and energy poverty. Who has too much money to pay for energy bills, right? So that's an incentive there. It's great to know that there is finance as well for projects like this. Now, Georgia, you have a lot of experience working with public sector and you're in the private sector. So how does Resulta work within this environment? How do you put them all together?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I think what Ramon just said is exactly what actually we are doing in the region. We are proud to say that at Resulta we've developed more than 300 projects, actually, much of which actually are with the public sector. And it's the beauty of the thing is that basically the projects are usually not requiring some CapEx subsidy when it comes to certain technologies like public lighting. There is the ESCO model, which is adopted in much of the region, where basically, I will explain in a very simple example. If the public partner, for example, pays 100 for the electricity and the maintenance of the public lighting, they can do that, but then they can save the CapEx for investing in the more efficient lighting, like LED lighting, by having some sort of public-private partnership, be it a formal PPP. I know in Montenegro there was a long-awaited regime for PPP, or other way, like in Croatia there is the public tender. But basically, then it is about the private partner who actually invests takes all the investment into assets, and then in a period from, I don't know, 7 to 15 years, maintain the equipment. And basically, the public partner is not paying more than he used to be paying before, because for him, the cost is, again, 100 or even less, but then because the savings are amounting to 70% or more, actually the difference is paid to the private partner for a given term. After the expiry of the term, actually the assets stay with the client. This is in public lighting. When it comes to buildings, we've done really wonderful projects around the region. One of them especially stands out in Ljubljana. In the city of Ljubljana, we've done 49 public buildings, and we reduced 40%, actually achieved 40% energy efficiency. But when it comes to buildings, either they require the change of the fuel and of the systems for ventilation, heating, or other systems, or they just need some sort of refurbishment. If they need the change of the fuel, then the projects can again be self-sustainable. But when they're not, we need some support, as you also mentioned, from the central government. For example, in the EU, it amounts to 49% of the capex via self-driving vehicle, and this is something we definitely need in Serbia, in Montenegro, in Northern Macedonia, and in the rest of the region. But overall, I would say that the awareness is much higher. There is big potential to really develop self-sustainable projects, and the governments as well as businesses need to really adhere to this plan.
Absolutely. We forget the governments have a lot of buildings themselves. They're landowners, right? And they have their portfolios. So with all the policies that governments are creating for the nation, they also need to walk the talk and improve their own performance. And of course, there are savings to be had. So what's not to like, right? So we talked a little bit about Porto Montenegro already. You know, that's where we are, right? So the Adriatic region has huge potential for development. There is a need for development, right? So there is a need to do it in a sensitive way for the cultural heritage, but we also need to build anew. So I wanted to hear a little bit, Leos, about your practices. In Albania, you had a development very similar to Porto Montenegro on the Adriatic coast. What can you tell us? What are the similarities? What are the different approaches? How did you think about climate change? You know, we hear about sea level rise. You know, so do you have buildings on pontoons, and how do you deal with that?
Thank you for having me. Well, I mean, David said something very interesting yesterday. Development, by the very act of it, is a change, and it's up to us to make the change in a sustainable manner. And especially in the countries that are still developing, this is a very big necessity. In every project we do, not only in the seaside, we try to capture the characteristics of the development area by preserving both an environmental aspect and the social aspect. Now, both of these factors, we carefully consider them during the design phase of the project, which is the very crucial phase in which you can achieve the utmost sustainability benefits in the long run. So when it comes to the seaside development, climate changes related challenges like extreme weather, hot and cold. Luckily, we don't have the sea rising levels an issue because the construction starts at a higher point in the slope. But still, there are many other challenges like waste management, absolutely crucial for the seaside development. Water, it's extremely important. And I'm going to give some practical examples on what we did in our projects, not only in the marina, which is very similar to Porto Montenegro, but also further down in the south. We have a huge development, the Green Coast Village. Now, I mean, the development area is more than 500,000 meters square of land, and we have planned only to build 10% of it. So the remaining part will be used as a vegetative layer and preserved. Also, what we did, which is very interesting that I would like to share with you, we have designated like 65,000 meter squares of green corridors. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because the primary function of these green corridors is to preserve the natural environment and transplantation of plants that are otherwise affected by the construction activity. So we try to preserve as much as possible from this very act of change. And another key factor is that all of these green corridors will collect the rainwater, and then the rainwater will be used in the irrigation in different periods. So therefore, reducing the water consumption, the customers which are buying over there, they are getting a long-term value on this. And I'm mentioning this because when we think of sustainability practices in construction, we always believe that there are very high expenditures, high investments, low return, or no return at all. So there are, if you incorporate sustainability right on the onset, you can also make use of the landscape and take advantage of it in a good manner. And we have done a lot of small things like this, also green terraces, increasing the overall vegetation of the project. I mean, the buildings are organized naturally on the slope, so to be as minimally invasive as possible. So all of these have a positive effect on the climate change related risks. And on top of that, we do not use, for the internal movements, we use only electric vehicles, reducing pollution, reducing noise, and of course, less scope. And of course, I'm not mentioning here the building materials and everything else that helps reduce the energy consumption of the buildings, or the large investments that we do in our marina project, which I mean, there are substantial investments in the facade of the building to optimize light and energy efficiency. But we see that not only from a regulatory perspective, or we think it looks good on paper, but also we provide a long-term sustainable value to whoever is buying the buildings or the investments or the asset owners. And I mean, we have an international customer base, also the national customer base. They are becoming more and more aware of this type of the sustainability and ESG and the very ambitious goals that the countries have, and they don't want to end up with an asset that they're going to have to invest in the future. So they're starting to take in consideration already now that they want a sustainable building for their investment. So. Yeah.
And you're producing that, that's good. I know from my practice that we do due diligence very, very carefully, because then you're going to sit with that asset as an asset owner for a period of time. So David, you were mentioning last night when we were talking some strategies that you have implemented in Porto to ensure that buildings operate efficiently throughout their holding periods. It's not only about constructing them efficiently, but also making sure that they operate in continuum efficiently. But I also wanted to ask you to touch, one of the things that I've heard is that Porto Montenegro development was great socially for the city of Tibet. And I'm really interested, when you have developments like this, we talked about social license to operate. There is a disturbance, right? Nobody likes to have a construction site next door. So how did you engage with the community? How did you bring them on side? What did you give back to them, both during the construction and in long term?
You have to go back a long way to answer that question. You have to go back to 2007, and of course I wasn't
only
in Montenegro.
In 10 minutes, but it's okay.
wasn't in Montenegro in 2007. So, but I obviously have an impression of how that happened. But I just want to say a couple of things. I mean, I mentioned yesterday the difference between development and long-term investment. These are really, really, I can't emphasize this enough. So if you develop something and leave, then you may be conscious about the construction methods, you may be conscious about impact during the period of construction, but it's increasingly difficult to prioritize long-term sustainability if that's your model, and of course for a lot of smaller developers that's the case. For larger developers who are investors and who stay in the community for a long time, as we do, then you inherently have a need to plan long-term, to plan sustainability in the broadest sense, and that's very much the case for us. So, the project was sort of founded in 2007. Back in those days, I know it was a very difficult period for people whose livelihood in what was then a largely obsolete shipyard came to an end, and they really had no idea of what the future held for them. And so it was a very difficult period. I know there was a tremendous amount of engagement and dialogue, some of it quite heated, obviously, during that period. But Over a period of time, people came to realize that, as they have in other countries, I mean, Wales, with the decline of the mining industries and so on, that redevelopment and investment with a long-term mentality is sustainable and generates a new beginning for them. And so I think that eventually became apparent to everybody. So a long-term mentality, I think, is really very important when planning and prioritizing sustainability. I mean, the site here, this land, we develop both on the land and in the sea on this site, but of course we also now are developing and owning and operating the shipyard on the far side of the bay, which is another huge business. We'll employ 300-400 people. We're already up to about 100 over there. We have about 350 full-time employees here at the moment, about 500 in the summer. And with the new development opening at Boca Place, that will, together with the shipyard, will rise very quickly to 1,000, and we'll go beyond those. And those are direct employment jobs on the site in the assets that we own and operate. And then, of course, there are the indirect employment opportunities. So people see that. I think the engagement that you have, the dialogue that you have, we have a lot of work done. We have fantastic HR team here who run recruitment drives every year. It's a real challenge for us to get people to work in the business during the seasonal period. And luckily for us, we have a shareholder that is based in Dubai, and we are beginning to develop relationships between Montenegro and Dubai on an operational basis, so we can actually start to move people backwards and forwards seasonally, and we can open up opportunities for people abroad that they would never otherwise have had. So I think the social sustainability, I mean, at a grassroots level on site here, the team here has always prioritised very heavily their engagement and support of the community. It's a very conscious thing. It's a big investment every year, and everybody really enjoys doing it. So everything from supporting a local sports club through to opening our doors and inviting everybody to come and use our equipment and infrastructure in the spring, free of charge most of the time. And why do we do that? We do it because our team need to wake up for the season, and because our infrastructure is lazy during those periods. So why not? And I think our feeling was it was fundamentally wrong that people should walk backwards and forwards through this village every day and never feel that they had any opportunity to be involved in the good things that were being enjoyed by other people. It's just fundamentally wrong. So we found ways of allowing them to access and get involved in those things. So some of it's long-term planning, some of it's short-term initiatives. Obviously we've now appointed an ESG champion in the company, and we're developing a much more formal ESG strategy. But I suppose the point is that there's no replacement for interest and good intent on the subject of sustainability. So many of these things have been going on long before this became a major agenda item, because the people who are involved in the project love to do it and recognise the need to do it, and because they're from the community, most of them. More than, I think, nearly 90% of our staff are local people. 3 generations of the same family is very common in the company. And so you don't really need to engage with the community, because you are the community in that context. I mean, so it's a sort of virtuous circle. I mean, of course there are challenges, and of course there are interruptions of people's lives through the process of change. But we are, at the end of the day, a brownfield site. We are, and I think the strategic planning for the site was very good. Developing higher density development on a brownfield site close to infrastructure, including the airport, is obviously globally recognised best practice. And so from the very outset, the project was conceived well, and it was invested in by people who had a passionate interest in the country and the place, and that's very difficult to replace, even with legislation. Actually, I think it's not as effective as intellectual investment, voluntary intellectual investment. So we do run huge programs. We're now getting involved with younger people as well. So we're running sort of camps and overnight stays where children are encouraged to come and to think about what happens on the site and about the environment. We have an open an open day on the marina where we engage with the maritime college at Kotor, and every year students are brought down and taught about the marina and see some of the things that we do in the marina.
I'm not young, but you make me want to come back.
I'm sorry?
You make me want to come back. I'm not young, but you know, maybe I can.
Well,
stop into some of
that's
those.
the intention. I mean, that's the intention. Yeah. I mean, we've invested in technology. So, I mean, not only our own technology. You asked about buildings. I mean, we've started now to increase our commitment to specific standards in buildings. So we are designing to lead gold standard at WELL gold standard at our sort of health and fitness based development at Boca Place, and we'll be designing to both WELL and LEED gold standards in our new Synchro development. And so that's sort of, we're formalizing our strategy. We're increasing our renewable energy installations. We're exploring wind, we're increasing solar here, and we're also looking at thermal heat recovery from the sea, in particular, but also from the land. We're looking at geothermal piling, where the piles under the buildings will actually both disperse heat at some stages of the year and collect warmth from the ground at other stages of the year. So you know, there's technology is constantly evolving. Where we're not using very specific technologies, we're using common sense. You know, in our Boca Place development, every living room and every bedroom, every master bedroom, has full height opening windows and a ceiling fan. You know, it's just old technology, it's old school stuff. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it means that you can, you can ventilate your home and not need to use energy other than a little bit for the fan for quite large proportions of the year. You know, so it's naturally sort of built into the fabric of the buildings rather than necessarily being, you know, sort of active technology.
So that's exactly, you know, this long-term operational performance. That's what, you know, investors really want to hold sustainable buildings. And I'll just comment a little bit on social license to operate. So we heard, bring people on board and make sure you have locals on board and keeping them on board, right? And I think that's an excellent advice. So what you see from the Western, you know, large portfolio owners, what do they ask you to do, and what we can learn from that?
Yeah, thanks, definitely. I think that what we see is that the entire topic around ESG and sustainability, including energy efficiency, has become the mainstream. This is the main shift in the momentum, in the overall paradigm. I would say that what we are learning is that actually all parts of the society are now having this sort of requirement. It is the, let's say, balanced thing, because also the consumers are now requiring companies to be sustainable. And I think basically the most viable projects are usually such so as to really include the circular economy. So what I would say, what we are picking also from the EU, because part of Resulta's business is in the EU, is that actually we need to first get back to the basics. Let's see what we can explore at the present moment on particular site. I would give you a few, just two brief examples. In Plantage 13 Juli winery in Montenegro, we've been looking, inspired by our colleagues from Germany, at their heating supply system. And what we learned and found is that there are some vine cuts in Serbian Orezina od Vinove Loze, which can actually be used as a fuel. So what we did there is we replaced all systems that were actually fueled by mazout, having a lot of not CO2 only emissions, but also phosphorus and other very dangerous pollutant. And we made a circular economy project where something that was waste previously has become to be used as a fuel. The same thing we did also in state penitentiary Sremska Mitrovica in Serbia, where, among other things, they were producing some wooden pallets, but the rest of that was actually wasted. And what we did, again, switching mazout and other dirt and pollutants with biomass that was actually supplied from something that was previously waste. So I would say, coming back to your question, that first we need to explore what we have in our systems. There are a lot of opportunities to be saved, actually, with even without, in some instances, even without fuels. I would say what we learned is that we need to focus on energy efficiency first, even before we speak about the renewable energy. And this is, by the way, what is actually already in the EU regulation. There is the principle called energy efficiency first. So I would say the main learning is that we need to first improve energy efficiency of our existing systems, and then to add a layer of solar panels or other means for producing sustainable energy.
Excellent, thank you. Reduce waste is, exactly waste in energy, but all the other waste is, sometimes waste is actually gold, as you have said.
Exactly.
Isn't it? So we heard that governments are on it. They're putting in place policies, regulations, both for the existing buildings and for the new construction. And we have the the regulatory environment to really succeed, leveling the playing field, making sure that those that don't do well don't profit from that, right? So that's very, very important. We have heard that there is a lot of money out there from international institutions to invest in this. In one of the earlier panels, it was, well, we don't have enough green projects. Give us more green projects, and it can be also refurbishment or improving the energy efficiency of large estates, residential, public, you name it. We have heard that there are solutions, in private sectors, both for new construction and for the refurbishment and efficient operation of existing portfolios. And we have heard that good projects can actually enrich societies and really make sure that maybe societies that are potentially in stagnation can find new future or business of the future, if you like, and societies of the future through projects in infrastructure, through projects in buildings. So I want to really thank my panelists for being really on it, really clear in your responses, and really informative, full of good examples, I think, that we can all learn from all of them. Thank you.